Hi, everyone. It's your friends Robert and Kelly.
Hey, and we're back. We're very blessed today to have an amazing guest. We have Whitney Johnson with us, and Whitney. I'm just going to read a couple of sentences here, and I'm not going to do you justice, but Whitney Johnson is the CEO of Disruption Advisors, a tech-enabled talent development company, and an expert on smart growth leadership, growing your people to grow your company. So, Whitney, we're so just very enthusiastic here for our conversation today, and thank you for joining us on Time for Forgiveness.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm just really happy to be here and talking about this topic, which is so important.
Well, one of the things I want to dive right into is, we talk about forgiveness on the show, which is, I think, sometimes difficult to talk about and teach because it's so based in our emotions and there's so many layers to it. But the idea that when we unforgive or we're in a state of negative energy, you know, we also bring that with us and we're bringing it into a culture. I'd love for you to speak about my understanding is that you really cannot have harmony and growth if you are in a state of unforgiveness, negativity, and toxicity.
Yeah. Um, so I would love to share with you a story that really helps me frame how I think about this, and then I can talk about it within the context of a culture. So when I was 21 years old, I was really struggling with forgiving my parents, which I think many 21-year-olds do. Like, I need to forgive my dad, my mom for this and this and that and the other thing. And I came across this story about some children or teenagers that had gone into the desert. And they were having a fantastic time, as you would expect teenagers to do, when one of the girls was bitten by a snake. And so now they had this decision to make. Do they go after the snake and kill that snake dead, or do they get the poison out of the girl's system? Well, they're teenagers, and so they go after the snake and they kill that snake dead. But by the time they come back, the poison is now gone completely through the girl's system. Once they get her to the hospital, because the venom has spread throughout her body, she has to have her leg amputated. And I've thought about that story a lot in the context of me and any of us with forgiveness and in a culture is that when we are bitten by a snake, we're all bitten by snakes at work. People offend us. Of course they do because we're human. What do we do? What do we do with that? And the first piece for me is I think that for a long time I wasn't willing to acknowledge the fact that I had been bitten by the snake. Like there were fangs and there were poison and there was venom and it hurt, and allow myself to feel that. Um, but then we have to get the poison out. We have to be willing to forgive. We have to be willing to have other people help us get the poison out. Because to the question that you asked at the very beginning, if every single person in our organization has that poison from that snake coursing through our veins, through our blood, maybe not our veins, coursing through our body, that's a lot of poison. There's so much toxicity. And so I think that to answer your question, which is obviously a self evident question, an unwillingness to forgive completely can destroy our culture. And yet it's very, very difficult to do.
And Whitney, who typically this snake? Who does it usually show up as? Who takes that form? The snake.
Such a great question. I don't think it usually takes the form of the people who work for us or report into us. I think more often than not, it's going to be your manager, because we know from the research that 80% of whether or not you're happy on the job depends on the relationship with your manager. So frequently, it's going to take the form of the person you report into. But I think frequently it can also take the form of your colleagues or your peers, because your colleagues and peers, you all at some level, if you go back to family systems, you're all fighting for attention from mom and dad, if you will, from
Hmm.
your manager.
Right.
And so sometimes in that place of trying to get attention, trying to make sure that you're seen and valued, you can do things that hurt other people that require forgiveness. So I think more often than not, it's going to be your manager. But perhaps the more insidious piece is because you're going to be willing to forgive your manager faster is your peers and your colleagues at the same level as you.
And have you found, as you're saying that most of the individuals that maybe have been the snake aren't even aware that they were the snake?
I think so. I
Hmm.
really do. I think, you know, I think that most of us really are going about trying to do good work and we have the best of intentions, but we all have insecurities and we all have, and work feels most of the time very high stakes because it's a place that we go to validate and feel valued. And so, in that moment when we don't feel that way, we're quite likely to do things that are not our best self. And in that moment when we're not at our best, because we're just trying to feel like we're competent enough or worthy enough or not inadequate, that's when we're likely to bite people. So it's not this aggressive, I'm going to hurt them. It's in our trying to self preserve, just like that snake is trying to self preserve. I think that's when we tend to bite people.
And Whitney, you are an expert in coaching the healthy environment, the culture that's so important for successful companies. Where do you think, what does that look like in your experience, depending on the company size? But do you think it's as simple as, well, it just starts at the top and trickles down like we hear all the
Mhm.
time? But all these companies you've worked with, um, what is there a thread or a theme that runs through organizations that have a very healthy culture?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Robert, of course it starts at the top, but I think that frequently we have a lot more control over a situation than we think we do. We feel like we don't have control because the things that we want to control, we can't. And so, if I look at that within the system of an organization, yes, it starts from the top, but within your sphere or span of control. So, let's say you've got 3 or 4 people you work with, 3 or 4 people who report into you. If you make the decision that you are going to have the courage to forgive others, and perhaps more importantly, ask for forgiveness, you start to pull the poison out of the system. And as you
Mm-hmm.
start to pull the poison out of the system because of the contagion effect, then other people are inspired to pull the poison out of the system as well. I'm going to give you a real time example. Yesterday, I was on a meeting with some people on my team. Um, one of the people who reports into me, I said something that I wouldn't say offended her, but it hurt her feelings. She felt like I had labeled her. She reached out to me and said, "Hey, I just wanted to talk to you about this. This is what happened. This is how I felt." Well, now I had a decision. What am I going to do? Am I going to be like, "Well, you're off the mark, you know, you're wrong, I'm right," and now create poison in her system or more poison in her system? Or am I going to say, "Hey, can you hop on a call, a Zoom call, so I can see her face to face and apologize? Let's talk about this. Let's work through this." I pulled the poison out of the system, made sure there wasn't more poison. And now, on the other side of that half an hour conversation, we're both healed. We both
Mm-hmm.
feel better. We both feel empowered. We've both gone to the doctor, pulled the poison out, and we are both healthier and stronger as a consequence. And you do that over and over again across an organization. I don't care if you are the most junior person in that company, in that organization, it will start to course in a positive way throughout the entire system.
But when you say you've got to be courageous to ask for forgiveness, we're really, I think another word, especially in the workforce, is you have to be courageous to be vulnerable. And that took great vulnerability for you to even share the example with us because it's about you. You could have already labeled yourself as a type of person because she felt that way. But I think that is, especially in the culture of like your profession, there is a layer of like, I don't want to admit that I was wrong, that I did something that maybe somebody else was offended by. And that takes great awareness.
Mhm.
So I first want to acknowledge that about you. But what I want to go to with you is I have heard you say, disrupt yourself many times. I mean, you talk about it, you write about it. And if you want to go up, you disrupt. Well, most people don't like to disrupt. They don't like the feeling of it. It's uncomfortable, but most people are waiting for life to disrupt them first. What would you say about that to someone?
Yeah. Well, so when I think about the idea of self disruption, so we think about oftentimes you're disrupting with a product or service or company or country. Yeah, or country. And when I think about self disruption, I'm describing this as a deliberate process of self innovation. And so I think it goes to this place of what game are you playing? Are you playing the game of the very long game? The game of I want to be a better person. I want to develop my character. And is that the game you're playing? Because I think if that's the game you're playing, then it becomes very easy to be willing to say, I need to ask for forgiveness and I need to forgive. I need to do both. Um, there's a really wonderful quote that I would love to share with you. I don't know if you've heard of she's a theologian um, in the UK. Her name is Amy Orr Ewing. Do you know her name?
Mm,
Have you heard of? Okay.
Yeah.
mhm.
She said something that I thought was really, really powerful when I think about the idea of forgiving and forgiveness. She said, why would we care what anyone does? Does this rage tell us something about who we are as human beings, that we are more than a blob of atoms? Perhaps our human rage at wrong, whether we are wronged or we're wronging someone else, points to the sacredness of life.
Yeah, I really, it goes back to the patterns that we run, Whitney, and I think the emotional patterns are very deep,
Mm-hmm.
and they're triggers, right? For most people, this happens. This is how I respond. They say this, I do that, um, and so Kelly mentioned self awareness, but also I think the thing that has to be removed is the ego because immediately we go to I'm offended. And I think that's the prevailing wind today in society is it's so easy for people to be offended. And then it's we're reacting instead of responding.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, like in the environments that you're working with your clients, and I'm not sure if that's large group or individual teams, smaller group numbers, but how do you get people to actually like disarm a little bit so that you can begin to make that shift with them? Do you have different strategies that you would recommend to our audience that they could use maybe even in a household environment?
Yeah, I think so. Wow. Okay, so you went to household environment from work. So let me start with. Um, it's interesting when I think about household environment. Do you know that one of the ways you can get better at forgiveness is to practice forgiving? And I
Whitney,
remember.
I just want to interrupt you real quick. The reason I thought of that household environment is because, are you different in the workplace than you are at home and vice versa? Because I think it's how you do one thing is how you do everything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking, well, there might be somebody in our audience that says, well, I don't really deal with that at work, but I love those ideas that I can take home with me and,
Yeah.
with my wife and kids. That's my thought around that.
Well, and where I was going to go with this, so I have two children in their 20s, and both of them are living at home right now. One's in school, one's doing a remote job. And I remember reading this article by Kate Holbrook, who talked about one of the places, the crucibles of forgiveness is when it comes to housework.
Mm.
Because we were having this experience where at one point our son's job was to do dishes and he wasn't doing the dishes, and we would remind him to do the dishes and then he wasn't doing the dishes, and we would remind him again and he wasn't doing them again, and I was getting so frustrated. And while there was an element of needing to be willing to provide boundaries and say these are the expectations of you, it was also on a very frequent basis an opportunity for me to be willing to forgive. And so I do think there is some element of our being able to practice forgiveness at home, especially because the stakes in some ways are a lot higher, but they're also lower because you're more committed to that relationship. And so by practicing forgiving each other, then that allows you to practice or take that practice into the workplace. Now, back to your other question, and I think this is an important piece of it. Often, when we go in to work with a team who are either trying to stand up a new team, they've got a new leader, they've got KPIs that they're working against or toward, and they're not doing it very well. One of the things that we find almost always is that because people aren't trusting each other, and they're probably not trusting each other because they need to forgive each other because they have not felt safe. And so one of the things that I would encourage anybody to do that's trying to get better at forgiving and also having the courage to forgive is to put each other in a situation where you start telling each other stories. Stories about who you are, where you grew up, what you care about, what was difficult, what was challenging. Because what happens is whenever I meet a person, my brain automatically sees them as a foe. But when someone starts telling me their story, my brain rewires and I sit on the same side of the table with them and I see them as a friend. And when I start to see people as a friend, then when my feelings are hurt or when I hurt their feelings, it's going to be much easier, much easier to muster the courage to either forgive or to ask for forgiveness. So that would be my advice there is at home practice and then take that practice into the workplace. And in the workplace, find ways and opportunities for people to tell stories. And with that as your starting point, then you can start to do some of that work of building trust so that when you do offend each other, because you will, you now have the goodwill and the willingness to ask for and give forgiveness.
It's really, you're talking about kind of somewhat opening up to the idea of empathy, moving from the perspective of like always focusing on what's missing in the circumstances in the person to, I wonder why they're saying that. I wonder why they're doing that. A great mentor of ours, and I believe yours, had once said, you know, you need to do better. When you have a higher level of awareness, it's not that you're better than anyone, but maybe you're more aware because you've studied it or and practiced it. You really need to ask yourself, I wonder why they're saying that, and I wonder why they're doing that, and come from that place of empathy. So I love that you brought that up. I want to ask you in regards to maybe there are those people that are just always negative, going to be negative. They bring toxicity to the culture. And so when we talk about, there's a lot of things that you cannot control, but the one thing I do try to control in such a big way is my emotional state and those that surround me, because people are either going to add value or they're going to take away. So what are you going to say to someone that is like, I buy into everything you're saying, I'm practicing those things, but I am around these people that are always negative, they're going to be negative. What would you say to them?
Mm. Well, it depends. There are going to be some people that you need to remove yourself from because it is so toxic and you don't yet have the emotional regulation and capacity to be able to deal with that. And so I'll give you an example. Just the other day, I was coaching someone who's in a work situation where they've got this situation where people are starting to view that person negatively and it's starting to seep into his psyche.
Mm.
And while he can do all sorts of, focus and meditation and positive attitude, when you are in that environment all day long, every day for an extended period of time, and I know because I've been there, it is really tough. So I do want to put out there as a starting point, sometimes you just have to remove yourself. That's the first piece. Sometimes, though, there are going to be instances where, for example, you have someone that you care deeply about, or it's a family member, And so do you do that internal work to say, okay, what of this is within my control? It's very easy, I've found, to blame someone else and say it is all their fault. But even if it's 98% their fault, 2% of it is still on me. So what do I need to do differently? Now, I don't want to do that part, because guess what? If I take even 1% ownership, what does that mean? It means if I'm not happy, then I have to take ownership of this. I have the agency. I have to manage this. So there's that element as well of like, you're gonna work on that. On the more quotidian kind of day-to-day things, I think it's important to be aware from a mirror neuron perspective. And we've all had this happen where someone's in kind of a cranky mood, frustrated, angry. If you can open up that space and just say, huh, how are you doing? Or smile at them, give them a little bit of space. And not have it affect you, because you have someone was asking me the other day, if I could have a superpower, what would it be? And I would say emotional regulation at all times. No matter what happens, I don't respond to someone else. I think that's the gift you can give. So again, sometimes you're going to have to remove yourself because you don't have the capacity to manage it. Sometimes you're going to have to step it up in terms of your emotional regulation to handle it because it's a relationship you care about. And sometimes you just are going to build that muscle and hold that space for people to be frustrated. But the bottom line for me, when I think about this, is that, again, as I said earlier, we always have more control than we think we do. It's just that the stuff that we have control over, it's really hard, and we don't always want to do that work.
That's very well said.
It is. Yeah, I'm already thinking through everything you said. One of our dear friends is actually writing a book called Superpowers. And we've been talking about this. And I was thinking, I wonder because you do that with intention and decision making. And that's a big idea. I love what you just said. What if everyone had that superpower? It'd be.
I think we do. It's just we have to find it inside. We have to draw
Not
it
very
out.
developed yet.
It's like it has to be a super intention too, that we develop the muscle, right? Because that is a muscle to me that we have to work on.
For sure.
Yeah, because I grew up, Whitney, in a Italian American household, and it was a lot of high volume, a lot of screaming. Everybody's reacting like that. And there certainly wasn't anybody saying they were sorry for anything. So that was my paradigm growing up. I mean, that was my programming.
And my programming, and I watched, no one said they were sorry because you just avoided. You didn't go there, and you kind of manipulated and waited for somebody else to say they were sorry first. So when the two of us came together, that didn't work out very well, Whitney. So, but that is a really big idea that you said and it's so true. We all have more control in a circumstance than we want to admit, because it's most of the time we get to go do that work in ourselves.
Yeah, and I think hopefully this conversation, for folks that are watching it out there, you can ask yourself, where do I need to go to work on me? Because at the end of the day, it's all about us. What do we need to improve upon? And where is the work that we need to identify in our life, and be honest and open about it, and then take action around that.
Yeah. Robert, as you said that, then the thought that came to me, continuing on this theme of forgiveness, is I remember coming across this wonderful quote by Maya Angelou, who said, "We need to forgive ourselves." I'm paraphrasing. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing. We need to forgive ourselves for not knowing what we do now, not knowing then what we do now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, in this process of forgiving others and asking for forgiveness, one of the hardest challenges, and I do think it needs to be work in parallel, is learning to forgive ourselves and giving ourselves grace as well.
Thanks for saying that, Whitney. I know we focus a lot, or not focus, but we have a lot of interviews or conversations around somebody forgiving somebody else. Something happened. Somebody was wrong. But at the heart of it, we're not going to be able to forgive others unless we feel the freedom inside. And we've done that work.
So
So
would you say that's because we say the word practice, and it's really another word for, we get to practice and have repetition. Um, has that become easier for you to forgive yourself, or is that something that is still more of a challenge?
It's definitely become easier. I mean, I think about if I look at the script of how I talk to myself internally, um, I am much kinder to myself internally now than I was, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago. And I think that there is that mirror of if I have gotten better at forgiving others, then I would say it's almost a certainty that I've gotten better at forgiving myself.
Hmm, I like that.
I like what you just said, Whitney, about if I listen to my internal voice. Is that
Mhm.
is that what you said?
My internal script, I,
Right,
I
the
look at it.
script. Because we all have one, and it's a predominant script that we run over and over and over again. And it's typically hidden or disguised in an old story that may not even be true. So there's a hidden commitment around that. And
Hmm.
so Kelly and I have been working right
Well,
now on our hidden
we
commitments.
just were asked,
Yeah.
invited to spend 48 hours really listening to that inner dialogue. And you say, well, I don't really have that. I don't really talk to myself, but we all
We
do.
all do.
And what surfaced for me was interesting because it was something that I thought I left that so long ago. And it has gotten better, and I have really grown and expanded in the concept, but it was still there. And in the past, I would have judged myself for that. But now I look at it as I'm going to let that surface as feedback that I get to go back to work in that area, but it's not a bad thing. And
Hmm.
I hope people start paying attention to that voice because it can tell you a lot about the direction you're leading in your life.
Yeah, for sure. And when you said that, what else I thought of that I've been thinking a lot about is I've been studying Joe Dispenza's work, and um, that we get addicted to certain emotions. So
Mm.
we can get addicted to being angry. We can get addicted to not forgiving people. We can get addicted to resentment, whatever it is. But if that's true, then that also means that we can train our bodies, just as we can train our bodies to feel resentment, we can train our bodies to feel happiness. We can train our bodies to feel calm. We can train our bodies to feel joy. And so that's something that I've been spending a lot of time on is how can I train my body to feel the emotions that I want to feel? And so that if I go to that default wiring or script like you just described, Kelly, I can say, wait a second, okay, that's not real. That's just my brain saying, yeah, let's run this script right now. But I don't want to run this script. I want to run a different script.
Hmm.
So when it runs the script that you want, what are you telling
Uh-huh.
yourself then?
I am telling myself, I'll give you an example. There's a young woman I know in my church community who's had a very difficult upbringing, abuse, etc. And I've tried to help her, and and over the course of 8 years, and she's just not making any progress. Not making any progress. And just the other night, um, she reached out and said, hey, can you come do this X, Y, or Z thing for me? And I got so angry and so judgmental. And my daughter was looking at me and she wasn't saying anything. And I could tell that she was judging me. I'm like, what are you thinking? Her name's Miranda. And she said, well, Mom, I think that it might be nice if you recognize the fact you say you think she's not trying, but I think it's impressive that she hasn't killed herself yet. Maybe she's doing the best that she can. And so
Mm.
the new script, that little gentle voice that came into my head is the next time she asks for help, instead of judging or getting frustrated for why she hasn't improved, what if you just had compassion for the hell that her life has been and that she's doing the best that she can?
Mm.
That was the script that I want to run.
I I just had a conversation with someone that just reminded me as well. I'm doing the best that I can, and It's a great reminder, I think, to everyone that most of those individuals aren't looking for judgment. They're looking for exactly what you just said. And they desperately need that from someone. So thank you for sharing that.
Little grace goes a long way, right?
So I
Yeah.
know
Well
we're
said.
approaching our 30 minutes here. I really would love for you to, is it a word, is it an idea, is it a feeling around your relationship with forgiveness?
You know what word came into my head when you said that? Gratitude.
Hmm.
Gratitude that we can forgive, gratitude that we can be forgiven.
I love that.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. That immediately creates a vibration in your body. I just felt it.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And it's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
So, Whitney, one thing you want to share with the audience, one big idea you're working on. I know you've got a new book coming out. What do you want to share about what's coming on the horizon in 2025 for Whitney Johnson?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm really grateful that you asked me to talk about this topic because it is something that I've been working on and working through. So thank you for the opportunity to just wrestle and chew on it a bit more. The big thing for me that I'm working on right now is I have, over the past 10 years, really been preaching the gospel of disruption, disrupt yourself, deliberate process of self innovation. But one of the big epiphanies that I've had over the past couple of years is that when you think about disruption, what I was really saying is transformation. How do you change? But in the construct of transformation, disruption is actually only one piece of it, that you cannot disrupt if you don't have stability, because disruption without stability devolves into chaos. And so, this book that I am working on right now is all about the topic of stability.
Hmm.
How do you create stability? How do you use stability as a mechanism for transformation? And what does that look like in an organization? What does that look like for you individually? What does that look like, um, in and looking at all the stability that actually already surrounds us? So that's my big idea, the thing that I'm working on, and I'm super excited about it.
I'm buying the first copy. I love
Thank you. Good.
because that is, I think a lot of people do want disruption and they try it and then they're left in this chaotic state and then it doesn't feel good and then there is no transformation. So, anyway,
Well,
I'm
we loved
excited
your
to
other
read it.
books too, Whitney, and I can't wait to get a new copy. And for our listeners, go to whitneyjohnson.com, find out about all of her books, her coaching, where she's going to be speaking at. And Whitney, again, we just feel so blessed to have you on. Thanks for your heart and just all you're doing to really impact people on a very large scale. You always impact us every time we get a chance to talk. So we love you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you to Bob Proctor for introducing us. What a
Yeah.
Yes.
lovely.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So we're at the part of the segment where we're going to take one of your questions. We do that from questions that were submitted from last week. So if you want to have us consider one of your questions, just go to our website, timeforforgiveness.org, and submit it there or our social media sites. All right, Kelly, you're
And
up.
we do love these questions. They're actually really fun for us.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
okay. Okay. How did you two meet?
How did we meet? Wow. I'll let you go first.
Well, we met at a bar. So we did meet at a bar through friends of ours. But he was actually already dating someone else.
Oh, man, I don't know if I remember those details. But yes, we did meet in a bar, and I saw Kelly walk in, and I knew I was going to ask her to dance. And
I thought you were going to say you knew you were going to ask me to marry you, not dance.
well,
Okay.
that's after we danced,
Okay.
and I knew after that one dance that she was the one. No, I mean, I did know that Kelly was the one very quickly. I will say that, and because I was a little bit older, I was almost 30. And you know how they say, you know, when you know, when you know, I think that actually happened.
Hmm.
I just knew that because it only took 4 months for me to ask Kelly to marry me.
5.
So I knew
I
5 months.
I was
Yes.
actually to say I didn't know that I knew just yet, because that was a quick decision. but I knew pretty quickly.
Now looking back, I see how that was really outside of the box for you because you're way more intentional about making quick decisions. So I'm glad that you said yes,
Yeah,
darling.
I am too. So I appreciate your question.
And here we are 30 years later.
Hmm.
So I think the moral of the story could be go with your intuition. Go with your intuition. God's leading you, whatever you want to call it. God's leading you in every aspect of your life. All right. Thanks for the question. And again, join us on our website for all the information about the Forgiveness Summit in May. And again, please share, if you like what we're doing here at Time for Forgiveness, share this with your friends and your family, people that you love. Ask them to join our community. We'd love to have them. And message us any questions you have again on our website. We'll see you soon on Time for Forgiveness.